Okay, so now we're going to continue talking about memorizing scripture, why we memorize scripture, and one of the reasons why we memorize scripture. We just finished talking about scripture memory and how it edifies us as individuals. Now we're going to take a look at how memorizing scripture can edify others. So, serving others, I've used the reference of First Peter 3:15, and this is from the New King James Bible. It says, "Always be ready to give a defense to everyone who asks you a reason for the hope that is in you with meekness and fear." And I know that this oftentimes is, people will refer to their testimony, which is also really important. We need to be able to explain our testimony and how the Lord has done things in our lives. But we do live in a time when a lot of people have very specific questions about Scripture and what Scripture says, or misunderstandings about what they think that Scripture says because they've heard something and they think it's in the Bible. For example, people might think when people say God helps those who help themselves, people think that's actually in scripture and it's not. So knowing what scripture says is really important when we're serving and relating to others, whether they're believers or unbelievers. So serving others and sharing the gospel. So this is a quote from John Piper in an article titled Why Memorize Scripture. And it says, opportunities to share the gospel come when we do not have the Bible in hand. Actual verses of the Bible have their own penetrating power. And when they come from our heart, as well as from the book, the witness is given that they are precious enough to learn. And this is really better said than how I was trying to explain it just a second ago. So that's something to keep in mind when we're thinking about how memorizing scripture can help other people. And then from Romans, it says in chapter 10, verse 17, so faith comes from hearing, and hearing by the word of Christ. So serving others, sharing the character of God. When we have scripture committed to memory, we can clearly communicate the character of God through his revelation, commands, and historical accounts of his relationship with man. So, having an understanding of what scripture says, and when we're relating to others and being able to quote directly from it is extremely helpful when sharing the character of God because we can be honest about who God says he is and not just our opinion on who God is. I have also found that, and I'll just share this little anecdote, this isn't in my slides, but I have also found that sometimes when I'm listening to other people, having scripture memorized helps internally when I am just listening to them and maybe having a hard time. So, a good example might be I've had an experience where someone was really very upset with me because they disagreed with my beliefs on a topic that's to do with morality in the Bible. And he was very upset with me and, questioning my morality and telling me that I was being judgmental and et cetera and so forth. And in my mind, I just kept saying to myself, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And because I had that portion of scripture memorized, I was able to really listen to him and approach the situation with gentleness instead of getting defensive. And I think that that took this person by surprise. They were expecting me to react, but instead, because I had been prepared by scripture to know that this persecution is to be expected, I was able to stay calm in the situation. And in that way, that is also a way of serving someone else. So I was able to be a person who was available to have a conversation with this man because I was resting in the promises of God because I had scripture memorized. And so I was more available to him without getting defensive or angry, and in a way that is serving and loving someone else because it helped temper my upsetness. So oh, that's everything on this. I thought I had one more slide. So, okay, next we're going to talk about edifying the church and how scripture memorization edifies the church.